And I want to thank all of you for jumping on this morning. And as I said prior, this is an ongoing dialogue that we continuously want to have with all of you. And we will have webinars set up through the entire course of the outlay. This is the first phase with the rules as we get into the enforcement. So we're planning to have further webinars through the month of August, September, October, and definitely keeping you up to date on everything. I want to start out by saying these are rules that have not been laid out by the local level. You know, it is not our will to have all of this be changed, but rather these are kind of the cards that were being dealt from the loss of a lawsuit that aggressively went after antitrust. I will say that every day the Department of Justice is kind of unturning stones, and they're kind of the dog with a bone looking at our industry with antitrust. We're seeing that there's many different facets that are coming down the pipe that, again, we just want to be mindful. And I will also say, you'll hear throughout this entire presentation that these are not mandate rules. This is the pathway that we had to execute rules and implement rules to definitely be in full compliance to a settlement to a national lawsuit. So again, the consequences of violating or changing or manipulating or doing an end around to any of these rules can have larger consequences, not at just the local level, but we know that the lawyers are going to be watching that were a part of this class action suit. And I would also say that the Department of Justice, as I just mentioned, is going to continue to watch the full implementation across all facets of our industry. But I want to also just pause right now. And, you know, there's been a lot of doom and gloom. You know, obviously it came to a shock to all of us in March when NAR decided to settle. But this industry has been resilient. We've been through a lot in 100 years. There's been a lot of metamorphosis, a lot of evolution with technology, with forms, but we've always been resilient to definitely work collegially, to definitely do what is right for the client, as well as perpetuating, obviously, the American dream of home ownership. And I know that we will be resilient as we get all of these rules implemented and we start the entire process of working with all of our brokers and all of you as practitioners working with your broker to definitely build the business model coming out of this settlement. So I think there's a lot of potential. I think we'll be resilient. And I know all of you have the entrepreneurial spirit to definitely have your business move in a positive direction and, again, service all of the clients that you definitely have come to work with through all of the years. And I will just leave you with this last thought. We are in such a seller market right now where you can put a home on the market and probably sell it in some of our geographical areas in 2 hours. Individual clients are not walking away from the Realtor brand. They understand the value in all of you, and that will continue. And furthermore, this will enhance because, again, buyer agency and buyers want to be represented is not going away. And again, you will navigate the waters and be resilient coming out of this settlement. You want to go to the next slide? I want to talk a little bit about the effective dates. Like I said, it came to a shock that in mid-March that we were getting a phone call from the National Association of REALTORS that they were settling on the large lawsuit and all of the appeals that were put forth, again, with the lawsuit that was lost. But furthermore, it laid out a framework, and the framework was going to be that GLVR, with our multiple listing service, in mid-June, June 18th to be exact, would have to execute a document to definitely sign on and be a part of the settlement. Now, I will tell you, you're in great hands. We have a very thought-provoking board with Lori Campbell at the helm and even Mike Bernadine next year, that they've been definitely diving into all aspects with our entire board to definitely know exactly what is going on. Furthermore, we've worked with our MLS legal counsel. Rich Somack is not our legal counsel with our multiple list. It is the gold standard Larson Skinner out of Minneapolis. And Camille, who is our exact attorney, has had us on
what they call a subscription. We've worked with them where daily they were digesting all parts of the settlement and advising us just exactly what we needed to do. I will say we didn't race and execute the document that was laid out. We waited till just about June 12th or June 15th to execute all of the aspects of the settlement to make sure that there were no changes in the courts, no changes in the Department of Justice. And we just wanted to make sure that we looked at all of the aspects of what we were executing. When we decided to execute that document, that settlement now protects GLVR from litigation. We cannot be now brought into a competitive or repetitive, I should say, class action suit that would be coming back to take further action against members and the multi-list in terms of compensation and all parts that the first lawsuit was addressing. I will say too that we are also prescribed under the NAR, it was actually Appendix B, that these rules for GLVR only exist for the next 7 years. It is actually timed out in the settlement. So we're implementing everything today with the hopes that, hey, possibly in 7 years, compensation and some other things can come back to the multi-list. But again, we have to play, like I said before, the cards that we were dealt, and again, everything that we're implementing. Furthermore, this protected the multi-list and the participants, both the individuals and collective, from further litigation that the plaintiff attorneys were following. And I will say that the plaintiff attorneys were definitely watching who was executing and who was not executing these right up until June, where they were reaching out and making sure that and ensuring that we were joining on to the settlement. Now, some further dates, right in June, our board proactively updated all of the MLS rules and changes that we were privy to, traveling with Lori, Mike, Jack, and a few others in May down to the NAR mid-year meetings. Around May 16th, the model policy and the rules came out from the National Association of REALTORS. Mallory, myself, sat down for multiple hours and we implemented all of the rules and really cleaned up all of our multi-list rules. And the board adopted everything in the first Thursday of June. We did not roll them out, and we're going to roll them out after the webinar today based on the fact that there was a lot of confusion. I could tell you that right after the mid-year meetings, and we still to this day have individuals that are not putting compensation in the multi-list. I know Mallory has continuously put posts out there that until the effective rule change, and really the fields are going to change August 5th, you still have to put offers of compensation in the multi-list under the present rules that we are following. Now, none of the rules will be changing until the effective date of August 17th. So just to go through this time frame here, the effective dates are, as of August 1st, there will be the updated PAR forms will go live. Now, I know PAR is having some great seminars and webinars to definitely train and educate. And I know Allison has a slide here at the end where you will see the dates of those next seminars and webinars that will be through the month of August. Furthermore, PAR put together a great comprehensive standard form update. It's a 38-page document of the NAR settlement forms and comprehensive training guide, which Allison's going to get into a little bit later in the presentation here. And this will be a part of the GLVR website that you will have links to all of this. I'm encouraging all of you to dive in and take a look at the standard form update training guide, because it is quintessential to definitely know how to operate through the new forms that are going live August 1st. I always say this, the last battleground in this industry is the forms. We know that the technology is everywhere. We know Realtor.com and a lot of third-party aggregators are aggregating data where all of the clients could go and really identify where a home is. The forms are the last battleground. And again, with these changes, it's very key and quintessential to know, again, if you have something that is executed and live today, where this is going to evolve come August 17th and how to definitely effectively update all of the forms that you have. Furthermore, the MLS fields are going to go live and change August 5th. This was partly because CoreLogic has to, and I've worked with CoreLogic right from the beginning to definitely put us in the queue to have everything updated to bring our multi-list in full compliance. And what we wanted to do in talking to CoreLogic, we wanted to go live on August 5th, because if there are any glitches or any issues that are identified, we definitely want to make sure that within the 2 weeks leading up to August 17th, that they could iron out any technical error or technical aspects. So really the MLS fields and all of the compensation are going to be going away effectively August 5th. So really, there's really 4 big changes in the multi-list, and that is the compensation fields that all need to be hid post the settlement requirement, which is August 17th. And then all of the rule changes will effectively go in place August 17th. Now, just like we implemented 8.0, the board has definitely had a lot of dialogue, and we're going to be looking in September with a full strategic plan of the implementation of the rules, because partly the MLS has to enforce all of the parts that are laid out in the settlement. But we're working to come up with a great implementation plan of all of the enforcement. Now, just like the implementation of the 8.0 rules and how we were forced to do all of that through the pandemic, we will definitely be working with a large education process, which will span 5 to 6 months before, again, we go live with fines and all aspects. Because we know that you're going to be getting your legs kind of under yourself running here with the form changes, the rule changes, as well as all of your implemented business changes from your brokerage. Because really, the key thing to remember here is really this is flipping the industry really in a 180. And what I mean by that is the multi-list has been the contract that and the conduit of how all of you get paid. The multi-list has been the gold standard of putting in and working to collaboratively, effectively put commissions in, and that is how you get paid. That is being flipped, where now all of the contracts of how you get compensated are going to be originating from the forms, the broker's business model, and all of the implementation of how you now negotiate and how you work collegially with one another to definitely negotiate and get everything documented within the forms to get compensated. So the multi-list is no longer the gold standard and the conduit to get paid within this industry. You want to go to the next slide? Mallory Allison did a great job working with the team here, that we knew that it was so much to digest the FAQs at the national level. It's so cumbersome. They keep adding it every day. So what we did, we added to the GLVR website. This mimicked how we handled the Rapatoni crisis 1 year ago. We implemented on the member portal. If you go to the MLS page, you will see it says GLVR settlement FAQs. This will be a living, breathing document. Like I said, this webinar will be recorded and placed in this aspect of the website. On here is all of the local changes, all of the links to get you out to the national changes as well as the state changes. But we wanted to water this down. I think NAR did a great job of laying out a lot of information, but it is somewhat cumbersome. And we wanted to definitely work to make it more navigable, that you could read all of this and definitely soak up kind of all of the rules, regulations, and all of the aspects. So like I said, this is going to be a living, breathing document. So as you come across some great questions out there, and even the questions that are going to be posed at the end of this webinar, we will definitely work to definitely enhance this, because there's going to be a lot of moving parts with IDXs and feeds. There's going to be a lot of moving parts with the new rules. There's new enhanced rules of what you need to do in terms of having executed documents with buyer agency. So again, all of these questions are going to be laid out, and even how to navigate with, hey, I have an executed contract on August 16th. What do I have to do come August 17th to be in full compliance of the settlement? And Allison's going to walk you through Appendix C of kind of what you need to do. So again, the rule changes. The definition of cooperation is changing. Traditionally, this totally meant compensation. Like I just said, in the multi-list, cooperation and all of that was laid out to be compensation. It now means the obligation to share information on listed properties and to make property available to other brokers for showing to prospective purchasers and tenants when it's in the best interest of their clients. And remember, everything is negotiable from this point on. We know that it always was negotiable, but obviously there is a new spirit to the negotiation, that there are just not numbers that are placed within the multi-list. But in this evolution of cooperation, there is still keeping Article 3 of the code, that procuring cause, commission disputes can still be subject to arbitration. But again, arbitration is not going to just be looking at what it says in the multi-list, because again, this will not be in the multi-list. There's going to be a whole new facet of other areas that need to be triaged with the forms, with the correspondence. And again, this comes back to something that we talk about I know Sam Ruda, who's on, he talks about this heavily at new member orientation. What's in the contract? He poses to them, what is in the contract? That's the gold standard. So all of that moving forth will be very heavily reliant of the forms and every aspect of how you get compensated. Another rule kind of update that NAR is posting everywhere, and again, we all know that everything was negotiable, but again, NAR is putting this everywhere. They added it to the MLS rules. They've added it to just all aspects of the settlement pages, the control of the commission rate and the fees. The service shall not be fixed, controlled, recommended, suggested, maintained, or anything. As we always know and always did know, that there is no fix, there is no going rate. And again, this just brings everything further in the mind of the settlement, that the provisions will be formally repeated, continually repeated in the forms and disclosures made to bring added consumer transparency. So again, and lastly, as I said multiple times here this morning, there will be no commissions allowed or offered within the multi-list. This is Rule 6.1, where compensation specified on each listing, no compensation offers will be in the multi-list. Again, the participants, subscribers, they can't put this anywhere. And you will see, don't get cute with this. We don't want to see it in further remarks. We don't want to see it in any forms, any pictures. We're going to have full CRS is actually working. They have our compliance checker, as you know. It goes out with, if you don't have photos in, they have now adopted in August and September, they're going to be working with AI to definitely be checking all parts of the multi-list. I will also say that you cannot utilize any ancillary service to offer compensation within the multi-list. So if you are using showing time and giving feedback through showing time, you cannot put a compensation amount in there. You can't use Supra. You can't use any ancillary service to show a commission or suggest or hint any possibility of what those payouts would be, because again, that would violate the settlement and all aspects of it. We know that the settlement is heavily applies to residential real estate listings. But again, for the purpose of the rules in the multi-list, commercial listings do fall subject. If you want to go to the next slide, commercial listings, although the settlement, like I just said, does apply to residential real estate listings, there may be no offers of compensation for commercial listings in the multi-list. Allison and myself talked to NAR this week when I got back, and Rodney Gancio made it very clear that anything in the multi-list cannot provide any form of compensation. Commercial showings, as we all know, don't require the buyer agency contract to be signed before the property gets shown, and that's going to be an evolution that Allison's going to go through with you. But again, I'm going to turn it over to Allison to now walk you through some of the implementation of the forms. And before I do, though, I'm going to say, I just want you all to know you're in good hands with the staff here, because Allison, right from the beginning, being an attorney, has dove into the forms with Mallory and has gone through all of the aspects of the implementation, and she's really looked at all of the rules. And I can't say enough that our board and our MLS committee definitely are keeping a pulse on all of this as we implement and keep on top. But Allison, I'm going to turn it over to you to definitely walk through the aspects of how the forms get applicable with the rules at hand.
So good morning again. Again, you are in good hands. We have been living and breathing and eating these rules since we were all surprised that Friday morning when we found out there was a settlement. But we are in good hands with our MLS attorneys, with our staff, with Justin, with our board. So, and if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can either put them in the chat. We've muted everybody just because there's so many people online today, but we've opened the chat. So Mallory is here. She's monitoring the chat. If you have questions, we'll take care of them at the end. And then we will also be updating that FAQ page. So hopefully anything that I go over today is not new to you. Hopefully your broker and your other agents have been talking about this for quite some time, but in case you do see something or something that is not been brought to your attention, hopefully it's in the slideshow. So seller concessions is a big thing. We're getting a lot of questions on it. They cannot be, seller concessions are always going to be in the MLS in some form or fashion. Concessions can include compensation, but the compensation portion cannot be communicated in the MLS at all. So what you don't want to do is to put something in your listing remarks or agent remarks saying, by the way, seller concessions are being offered, seller assist of whatever percent and buyer compensation of what percent. Don't put anything related to compensation in the MLS. It's pretty simple, right? You would think. So once the property is sold and settled, so this is something that Mallory took over on the back end of our MLS committee. So do you want to talk about the concessions?
Do you want to mute me?
Yes. I need to unmute her.
My button.
What?
My button.
Here, take my computer. There you
Hi. So on sold and settled listings for seller concessions, there have been some recent changes and some not changes. So the seller concessions yes no box is going to remain. The seller concessions comments box was already disabled and has been removed from input. The seller concessions amount box will remain. How the box acts may change in the future. That's to be decided between the MLS committee and the board of directors. Obviously, we'll keep you posted. How it will change, I mean, there might be, the box might stay as it is. There might be an additional drop-down box that might have you explain very simply what the concessions were, but not compensation. So that still will not be an option because concessions does not equal compensation. So we want to make that very clear that just because we have the seller concessions on sold and settled, that's not a way around to then sneak in the compensation information, because again, compensation is not allowed in the MLS. So we're trying to be very careful of how we put this in the sold and settled section, that it's not a workaround. It's not your way to sneak that information in. And so that is also why the explanation box has also been removed on input. You'll see that is also gone. So there might be some tweaks. Obviously, you know, this is uncharted territory a little bit, so things may change, but not much. So that is currently where we are at with seller concessions on sold and settled. Is going to be very simple, and we'll keep you posted if there are going to be any changes, but at the moment, this is how it will be as of August 5th. A yes, no drop-down box, no comments, no explanations, and the box for explaining the amounts.
Okay, thank you. So as you'll see, and if you've taken the PAR webinar so far in the new forms, you'll see in the new agreement of sale edits, there is a new paragraph 3, and that is where you can put compensation as a concession. So that is the place. So you will memorialize any compensation agreement that you've come to with the listing broker in the ASR instead of the MLS. And again, I want to just hit on something that Mallory was saying when we're looking at that seller concession drop-down box on the sold and settled end, we will not be putting in a compensation button as part of concessions. We've seen that with some other MLSs that are offering that on the back end. That is illegal. It is in violation of the settlement, and we will not be doing that. My slides are like a little slow this morning. Okay. Data feeds. Coming back.
Sorry, my MacBook was just like, I don't want to. So when it comes to data feeds, so an amendment notice, it will be going out to all RETS vendors. So if you have an IDX feed through the MLS, your vendor will be getting a notice hopefully this week. I'm just waiting on an updated list of all of our RETS vendors from Matrix. And that amendment will include information about changes to the data access agreement, basically outlining the settlement, that compensation fields will be removed from all RETS feeds, and that you will not have to refill out another data access agreement, basically accepting the amendments and continued use of the licensed data or the data interface means that you are accepting of those amendments. And but then everyone who moving forward gets a new feed, there will be an updated data access agreement moving forward. Everyone currently, as long as you and your vendor continue to use the interface, you accept the amendments that are being sent to them. What is changing is if you have an IDX feed, you can augment the data to include compensation for your brokerage listings, for only listings of your own brokerage. So what the goal is to not create a new avenue or a new place for compensation of everyone. So you can't make your own new MLS, basically, is the goal. Do not share listings from other individuals that have compensation included, which is an ethics thing anyway. Do not sharing is not caring, as Hank Lerner would say, as Allison would say. So already don't do that, but really be careful that you don't accidentally do it and share someone else's listing that also includes compensation information. I know that we have a Facebook page. All of you know what I'm talking about. Do not use that Facebook page to now include your compensation and talk about it and all that good stuff. We shouldn't have been doing that in the first place, but I'm just need to throw that out there. And so that's basically what you're doing for IDX feeds. You can still have them. Some people were like backing away saying, I really can't use them anymore. And really that's not true. You can use them. You can have compensation information, but for only listings of your own brokerage. Failure to follow the requirements could result in losing access to the MLS data under the agreement and for accessing the MLS in general. So and obviously with the settlement, as Justin had laid out, we have like basic fines in the MLS rules and regs, as little as $25. Fines related to the settlement are going to be much larger. So definitely don't want to go down that route. And I also do want to mention that we are taking Q&A. So any questions relating to IDX or anything else we're mentioning, throw them in the chat and we're going to go through them, and Justin will help answer them once we're done here.
Thank you. Welcome. All right. So again, as Mal said, sharing, as I always say, sharing is not caring. Just make sure that you're not sharing feeds from other brokerages, just like you wouldn't under Article 12 of the code. So I want to go over some of the new required consumer disclosures. Hopefully your broker has gone over this with you. If you've gone to the PAR webinar so far, I think there's only been one, and then also the broker one. You've seen this. So the required consumer disclosures are now codified in our MLS rules and regs. We need to disclose that broker compensation is not set by law and is fully negotiable, which we once again already knew. Now it's codified. This needs to be included in language as part of any listing agreement, buyer written agreements, and pre-closing disclosure documents. So again, this is going to be splashed everywhere. This makes total sense. Disclose in writing to sellers and obtain your seller's authority for payment that the seller will make to a representative acting on behalf of the buyer. So obviously, if your seller is paying buyer compensation or anything else out of pocket, they should know that in advance. Makes sense. And then this is the thing that has everybody a little bit up in arms. This is the written buyer agreement. So again, this has been codified in our MLS rules and regulations only because our MLS committee is now tasked with enforcing these rules that we've been handed. So all MLS participants working with a buyer needs to enter into a written agreement, which includes these 4 provisions. So the rate of compensation, the amount of compensation that's objectively ascertainable. So here is the kicker. Current buyer agency agreement has language accepting whatever the seller is offering. And that form had to get amended because obviously that is now illegal under the settlement agreement. So this has to be a objectively ascertainable and not open-ended amount. So it can't be whatever percent the seller wants to give me, whatever's left over, it has to be an actual percentage or number. A term that prohibits the participant from receiving compensation that exceeds the amount agreed to in the agreement with the buyer. So we'll get into that in a minute, because that entails sometimes giving money back, which nobody likes, and a conspicuous statement that broker fees and commissions are not set by law. So let me say a couple of things about this. This is triggered by working with a buyer. So working with a buyer is the who, and we're getting a lot of chats, I see already. Can we please have access to this? Yes. So working with a buyer. So what is working with a buyer? That is when you are doing something more than ministerial acts, as they're saying now in NAR. So you are finding properties, you are allowing people into homes that you are not listing. You're basically representing a buyer. Prior to touring a home is the when this has to be executed. So before you set foot in a home or you take somebody on a virtual tour of a home, this buyer agency contract needs to be executed. So there's great flexibility in the buyer agency agreement, which is nice of them to throw us that bone. You don't have to have anything prescribed in terms of the time, the compensation type. Are you going to be paid on hourly basis? Is it going to be a flat fee? Is it going to be a percentage? Is it going to be a per service? That is totally still up to you to execute. And you can have more than one agreement with each buyer. So say you have a buyer who's looking at 4 different properties. You can have 4 different buyer agency agreements with all different compensation specified based on the type of property or the type of services they need. So let me go to this slide. Come on. Okay. So there's no form that addresses what happens when the offer of a compensation from a seller exceeds the already agreed to amount with your buyer. So that is a little bit of a wrinkle. If a seller is offering 3% and you've already agreed to accepting 2% from your buyer, what happens to that extra 1%? So that is a business model question that you need to discuss with your broker. Is it going to be a credit at closing to the buyer? Is it going to be renegotiated with the seller to reduce the amount of compensation offered, which would then make an addendum to the listing contract necessary? So you can see where these have cascade effects based on what you've already negotiated with your buyer and what the seller is offering as compensation. So just keep that in mind when you receive an offer. So you will see that the provisions that I just read to you about our new Rule 6.3 are incorporated into the PAR buyer agency agreement that they have just updated. And this is a contract between the buyer and the buyer's agents. There is no requirement for you to give a copy of that contract to anyone. However, I can see this happening. We've talked about this with staff, that there's going to be questions about if somebody actually had a valid buyer agency contract. We can see it coming. So since we are tasked with the enforcement of these rules, we are able to ask for a copy of that contract if the validity is called into question, just like we are with any other document, a listing contract, addendums, seller's disclosure, things of that nature. And don't get creative. As Justin says, don't get cute. So we're seeing things and we're hearing things about how to do an end around these rules. And again, this is a national settlement. This is not an 8.0. This is not you forgot to put a picture on the MLS. This is not you forgot to fill in a field. This actually puts GLVR at risk if you are not, and your brokerage and yourself, if you're not complying with these rules. So please don't try to do an end around. So we're seeing this. If golden opportunity to live in Bethlehem Township when there's an understanding among practitioners that gold, silver, platinum means a certain percentage. So if you start coming up with like lingo, that's a problem. Also, we're seeing things like people putting in bold and underline the percentage. See this 2.5 bath home where you're saying, why is 2.5 bath bolded and underlined? That's actually the percentage. Don't hang a sign in the house with the percentage on it and then put the picture on the MLS. Don't put the picture on the MLS with the little banner at the top with the percentage. Mallory, do you want to talk about AI?
Sure.
I'm going to turn it over to Mallory. She's going to talk about our compliance checker for these things.
So as everyone knows, and it's great that my name is attached. We get not everyone, but the automated compliance notices that say Mallory Siegfried. I'm so sorry. But so we have an automated compliance notice system that actually is tied to CRS, which is also the tax system that we use. And the system goes through listings and catches things that are part of our rules and regulations. It is automated. I promise that I don't just sit there through the MLS all day and just yell at people. One of the things that CRS is currently working on is AI technology to be able to look at photos. And so, for example, one of our rules and regs is that the primary photo needs to be the exterior front. That currently cannot be checked, and that is something manual that either other agents will flag or I will occasionally spot one. And that's a manual notice that I do need to do. But CRS is working with AI technology where their system can flag that on its own. And so that AI technology is going to work on doing something like that, but also on situations like this where will catch those banners or an image with the 2.5% or something embedded or hidden in an image that doesn't belong. It's not available yet, but it is something that is, I think, expected end of this year, 2025. So it is something that is coming. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that is something that we are working on. So don't waste the effort or time. Plus, don't waste your money and get a fine, because that's not a joyful part of my day. But yeah, we are working on that technology and it is coming, and we'll keep you posted on when it becomes available.
Thanks. Yep, that means putting on the spot there. Okay. So speaking of compliance, which is the worst part of our jobs for sure. And again, we'd like to thank NAR for letting us be the hammer for this. Yeah, the realtor police for this. Violations of the settlement agreement can have serious consequences for the agent, the brokerage, and the GLVR, which we've just gone over. We are holding this training. We'll hold as many trainings as we need to throughout the fall and winter on the new rules. They're truly not horribly complicated. If you just remember, don't put anything in the MLS regarding compensation. That'll save you 99% of the time. If we see a violation and one's reported, Mal, myself, Justin will contact you to fix it within 24 hours. This is definitely an all hands on deck kind of situation right now. And fines are going to begin about 6 months after an educational period. So if you remember the 8.0 implementation, there was a whole grace period where we were trying to get people educated and up to date. We don't want to go out and start hammering people right away. This is new and different. However, if you're in the grace period and you keep violating the rules and you've been told over and over again, we probably will start fining you sooner, because then you're just kind of playing a game and we can't have that happening. Okay. So this came up pretty early on. What do you do with a current agreement? So you have a current agreement, you have an agreement signed right now, you know it's going to change in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So you want to use PAR form NPC to talk to your clients about the changes that are coming. And you can see these 4 or 5 things on this policy change form. So you will want to talk to them about this. This is not the fix to your contracts, though. I'm going to go back for a second. So you may wind up having to fill out appropriate addendums or re-execute an entire contract based on your listing contract and what else you have in those contracts. So please check out it. It's a one-page NPC form, very concise, tells you exactly what's changing, what you need to do to fix things. If you have buyers that you're working with and you don't have an updated buyer agency contract, or you don't have a buyer agency contract at all, since a lot of people don't sign them, you must get one signed ASAP. And one of the good things about this settlement, if you can say that, is that now you don't have to have the conversation about signing a buyer agency contract. It's just a mandatory thing. Everybody's going to have to do it, and you don't have to try to strong arm somebody into doing it. Again, you can have it for a day, you can have it for one property. It doesn't matter as long as you have that document signed. And here are the changed forms. So as Justin said, forms are key. They're more important now than ever because, again, that MLS is not going to be the thing that saves you in terms of compensation anymore. What you have in those forms are going to be the thing that gets you paid. So you want to make sure you know how to fill those out correctly and you have them executed in case there is a problem. So what's changed? 20 forms were updated. 2 new ones were created. 1 was deleted. These are the 6 that are most impacted. And you can see them on the screen. I'm not going to read them to you. But these are all, oh, thank you. These are all in this settlement form comprehensive training guide that you can get on the PAR website. I do recommend you take 20 minutes and just read through it. It's actually really good. And it will tell you everything you need to know. And we are going to try to do as much as we can to get you guys up to speed. So there's a PAR webinar August 7th. There's a PAR webinar August 23rd. If you have not registered for those, take the 2 hours. It's excellent. They go through the standard form changes. They go through the nuances that you would need to know. You can go on the PAR website and check that out. We also have a bunch of classes coming up. They are CE, so at least you're not, just wasting time. You're getting credit. Working with buyers in a changing market. We have a gentleman coming up from Philadelphia who has taught this before, but he's tweaking the course to talk about how to work with buyers now that you need to sign this buyer agency contract and working with some of those objections. Chris Rader, who I know is on the call, she's teaching this PAR form change class with the big 6 that are changing. And then we're having Melanie McLean up to do the real estate negotiation expert, which is probably more important than ever at this point, since you're going to have to negotiate some things that you never had to before. So that being said, I think we have questions.
Before we turn it over to questions, I just want to clean up one misconception that we're hearing a lot about. I've heard from multiple agents that other agents are saying, well, we better hurry up, or, there's some, we better get this transaction done because commissions are going away. Commissions are not going away. No one is requesting or saying that you need to work on a charitable basis. It's just a matter that the compensation and the commissions cannot be in the multi-list. And with that stated, you could have them on the forms. You could put a sign in front of the house that, has the commission or what you're paying out right on the sign on the top. You could definitely advertise that per your listing and how you negotiate with, bringing the buyers and the sellers all together. So commissions, let me just repeat that, are not going away. They're only going away within the multi-list. So again, I just want to clean that up. And that's something that we've heard a lot over the last few weeks, that, people are saying, well, now, the seller will no longer compensate the buyer. Well, no, that is not true. These are all negotiable terms that you will be having heavily dialogue as you're working with the buyers and sellers out there. But why don't we get it over and take a look at the questions that have come in.
So I'm going to move this back. And one of the other things I just wanted to touch on is, Mallory touched on it a little bit before. Please don't use MLS data to create a new platform to advertise commissions. One of the things that we've been warned against in the settlement agreement is that the MLS or GLVR cannot facilitate creating another platform to advertise commissions. So if somebody is going to be, and I know there's a lot of very creative people out there, which is a good thing, but please don't drag us into it, because again, we put us at jeopardy. So if you are building a Facebook group, if you're building a website, please don't pull in MLS data to do so.
And I guarantee the Department of Justice will find you if you are doing this. Furthermore, not only are we suppressing the fields of compensation, the one other aspect that was required of the settlement, just that you're fully aware, was all of the historic data had to be suppressed as well. So if you go back through any of the historic data, all of the commissions will be removed. But if you do need access to that, we have it set up with CoreLogic, and partly part of the settlement, our lawyers definitely advised us that you would need to write to the CEO, myself, on why you need that compensation, and we will forward that letter to CoreLogic and get you that documentation. But again, we had to not only suppress, this was not a line in the sand settlement, meaning all things going forward. Legally, it was an all-encompassing suppression of commissions. So all of the historic data had to be suppressed as well. I just want you to be fully aware of that, but you can get historic data with a letter to myself, which then I would correspond with CoreLogic. And partly our lawyers wanted it handled that way, where staff couldn't even see what the commissions were, just again to level the playing field, that we would have to go to the vendor to get any historic data. But why don't we open it up to some of the questions?
I'm good now.
Okay.
All right, I'm unmuting Mal. If you get an echo, please let us know, because she's sitting right next to me, so we can.
So I'm gonna go up to the top. Will Zillow, et cetera, now have to have buyer representation agreements to show virtual tours?
Yes, as soon as you are working with a buyer who is touring a home, that is the trigger. So yes, even a virtual tour triggers the buyer agency contract.
And I will also state that, under this settlement, Zillow is a brokerage, so they joined NAR, so they are beholden to the rules that are laid out into all of this aspect in their legal entity in terms of the settlement.
Yeah, so touring a home is that trigger.
Can there be a rider with BAC on for sale sign posted in seller yard?
Can there be a rider for the BAC? There can be a rider with compensation. So I saw Alicia also posted this. I saw it pop up. Yes, so you can post compensation anywhere. You can post it on your own Facebook page. You can post it on Skywrite it. You can have a banner. You can have a rider. You can have a sign in the house.
Someone said carrier pigeons.
Carrier pigeons are wonderful. Smoke signals great. Morse code, whatever you want, as long as it's not in the MLS. Please don't put it. And if you have a sign in the house, just don't take a picture of that sign and put it on the MLS.
Correct.
But I see nothing wrong with going into a home and having a sign on the counter saying, buyer compensation offered at 2.5% or whatever it is.
If there's any Harry Potter fans, I'm currently picturing owls
So
going around carrying compensation for realtors.
we're open to all ideas.
As long as it's not in the multiple.
Yeah,
As long as it doesn't come to
exactly.
us,
Do whatever
that's
you want.
fine.
That's what I'm saying. The creativity is going to be fascinating to watch.
What if a property is closing in 2 weeks and you are on both sides?
Okay, so this is the thing about dual agency. So dual agency, you actually need a buyer agency contract because you are working with a buyer. So I know maybe you're up against it as far as the 17th. If that property is closing after the 17th, you need to have a buyer agency contract executed for your buyer because you are working for a buyer.
And again, the new forms will be available come August 1st, this Thursday. That's why we had the webinar time today.
Yeah.
And again, that'll fill that void with dual agency.
So you may have to get
Good
that one
question.
signed pretty fast, but yes, you do need that signed before, as soon as August 17th hits. If that property is not closed, you do have to have a buyer agency. That was for another agent's listing.
For existing, can the commission be changed and initialed or new contract?
I
Does anybody have an
don't-
easy question?
Yeah, I don't
I'm
say,
kidding.
as a lawyer, I don't love the change in initial is fine. I get it, it's legal. I would prefer you do an addendum, an actual addendum, and there are plenty online, on PAR. You can even get a blank one if you want to write in your own weird terms. So you can certainly do that, but I would always err on the side of caution and definitely talk to your broker. Your broker might have a definite opinion about this as well.
Can you put compensation on your feature sheets you leave in home?
Yes, you may.
Yes.
Good idea.
What if it is an attachment contract on the MLS?
No.
No.
Anything attached, as I said before, with anything ancillary, even uploads, we're looking, and the new AI that Mallory laid out is going to be looking at documents, not only pictures, but you don't want to have that on a disclosure. You don't want to try to work that in anywhere to have a code. So anything that touches the multi-list is off limits to put any form of compensation.
Yeah, don't put on like a inspection report and like sneak 2.5% on there somewhere, okay? Because it's the same thing. It's on the multi-list.
Mhm.
So just leave us out of it. Okay.
What is the status of 8.0?
It is still in full effect. So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves. I don't really foresee that changing anywhere. I see these as two completely distinct things. I still think that that goes to the cooperation portion, and now the cooperation has been redefined to sharing and showing property. I don't see it going anywhere. I don't know if you have a different.
For anyone
view.
who might not know what 8.0 means, 8.0 is if you publicly market a property, you then have to put it in the MLS within 24 hours.
Maybe we should go over that because there's like a lot of 8.0 questions.
So, go ahead, Justin, you want to go?
Well, sure. Anything, 8.0 was rolled out in 2019. Jack Gross and I were sitting in San Francisco at the NAR meetings, and they kind of dropped the bomb. And we
They
had
do
the
that a lot,
pandemic
don't they?
year to definitely implement that rule. And what it states is you have one business day that once you publicly market a property to get it in the multi-list. So public marketing could be anything of the use of social media, and it could be as generic as 2-bedroom home, Whitehall, coming to the market tomorrow.
On Facebook.
On Facebook, even though you did not use that address, the spirit of what you're doing is marketing that property. So you are required within one business day to get that in the multi-list, and definitely share that and cooperate among all of your realtor brothers and sisters within the multi-list.
We have not heard anything that 8.0 is going away, not even a hint, not a whiff, nothing.
Now, I will say this is another area that is being looked at by the courts right now, but until we see what the courts do in the Department of Justice, 8.0 is still in full implementation. I will say, and just remember, 8.0 is public marketing. You are able to discuss in your brokerage, you're able to keep an internal listing within the walls of your broker, and that is not considered public marketing. And I will also say on the website, we have a great clear cooperation tab as well that is right next to the settlement tab, and there's many FAQs of things that have come up. But right now, 8.0 is still a functioning rule laid out by the National Association of REALTORS.
Sorry to break that to you.
And I know there's been a lot of pushback on that aspect.
Can dual agents still offer variable commissions if they bring the buyer? How is that disclosed? Does it have to be disclosed?
Yes, so under the code of ethics, you do still have to disclose a variable commission. It just cannot be in the MLS. So again, on those sheets that we were talking about leaving in the home, a phone call, whatever you're going to do to ascertain how much compensation is being offered. This is another point that's come up. I think the first thing that we talked about when we heard about this rule change is you're going to have to communicate more. And I know that that's a problem sometimes, getting people to call back or getting conversations going between agents. This is going to be difficult, and it's the most ineffective and inefficient way to do business, in my opinion. But you are going to have to communicate far more or figure out a way to get that compensation offer out there, because you can't just go on the MLS now and figure that out.
I'm going to be beating the drum over the next few months and talking to the board that, again, we need to get out information to get all of your cell phones, the broker cell phones within the database. Because again, as Allison just said, the new rules really prescribe a lot of communication that's going to have to take place to get the deal done. And, we need all of that data, and we need individuals to put their cell phones in, because again, there's going to be multi-discussions through the negotiation process to get all players to the table.
And I don't want to see, we don't want to see ethics complaints. Like, it's an ethics violation if you don't answer somebody back. I know that people are not really up to doing that, but I can see the amount of ethics complaints coming in because people are not. Can you turn your microphone off for a moment? Thank you.
Sorry for the echo.
I'm sorry.
I just got some
that. I can see not answering somebody is frustrating, and it's annoying, especially in this market when things are going so fast. So please cooperate with your fellow agents. We're trying to get through this together, and it's a hot mess, but we'll get there.
And I will say that, our MLS attorneys as well as NAR they've ruled many times that we can't make it mandatory for cell phones per se to be required to be put in the multi-list and make a rule. But I think this definitely moves us down the road and really creates a need that we need good tools to communicate. And what is more vital than the cell phone number that who you are picking up the phone, and at least you can get a broker on the phone if the two agents have conflict through this.
Yeah.
Well, now that I muted myself, I can't unmute.
Well, just read me the question.
Someone goes, did you just say that a rider on yard signs is legal, just to be clear?
I did say a rider on yard signs is legal. Go for it.
Yes.
Okay. Does this look the same for rentals?
It is. So,
Good question.
yes. So, one of the new forms that PAR has created, one of the two new forms, is a tenant agency agreement instead of a buyer agency agreement. So you want to check that out. The rules are exactly the same for rentals as they are for sales. So now you just have the added bonus of having your very own form for rentals. So again, check that out on the PAR website or go to that webinar. They will go over it, or that gigantic document that you can look. Okay.
Some of us who, especially those who do commercial, belong to MLS like platforms like CoStar
Mhm.
and LoopNet. Do these rules apply to the listings we enter in those platforms?
No. So again, here are the triggers. And this is, I called NAR yesterday because their FAQs confused me. So I called, they got back to us pretty fast, which is great. The trigger is the type of property. So if it's a residential property only. So if you're on a commercial platform, I don't know if this happens. I know we get commercial listings on the residential side of our MLS. I don't know what happens on CoStars, if you're even allowed to put a residential property on a CoStars type site. But if you are dealing with a residential property at all, you need a buyer agency contract. If you're dealing with a commercial property, you do not.
But I will add to that even commercial and residential in our multi-list, by executing Appendix B, we cannot put compensation. So it will not differentiate that, now commercial will still have compensation. That'll all be removed from the multi-list.
Right. So no buyer agency contract for commercial.
I assume then that seller bonus of X, if an offer is received by a certain date, would also be included by these changes.
Sure, because that is considered compensation. So that totally makes sense. Again, you can structure compensation however you like. Again, in paragraph 3 of the edited agreement of sale, there's all kinds of things that you can put in there. So a bonus is perfectly fine. Even in your buyer agency agreement, that's perfectly fine. As long as it's not in the multi-list, you can work it out any way you like.
Yes.
As long as you guys are getting paid, it's all good.
So if I am entering a new listing into the MLS today, I proceed as normal, but then have to make changes on August 17th.
Exactly. So the forms are not live yet, so you can't even go in and get the form to use. You could do it on August 1st. If you want to be proactive, the forms go live August 1st, so you certainly don't have to be scrambling around on the 17th. You can do it somewhere between the 1st and the 17th, but yes, definitely update your forms before the 17th.
And technically our MLS is removing compensation August 5th.
Yes.
Correct.
So our fields will go away, but you want your forms updated by the 17th.
You said before that compensation can't be on the Facebook group.
So this is what we're saying. So please do not pull in MLS data to then create a new platform to advertise compensation. So what I can see happening is people pulling in MLS links and then putting above in a comment or whatever, 3%, 2.5%. We are not able to facilitate the creation of a platform that advertises compensation. So please don't pull our data. Obviously we see stuff all over Facebook all the time for listings.
Let me just break that down and give you a hypothetical. Justin Parambo has a business page. He posts, I get a listing in Whitehall. I post it on my business page that I'm offering 1.5%.
You're cheap.
There's no standardization. But I put it on there. If Allison would share my post, she is now in violation because she is facilitating and putting that out on her website. So I could put it on my personal business page and it should remain there. But again, we shouldn't look to other sites or other conduits such as a grouped site to definitely put those listings, because now we are breaking the spirit of kind of the aspects of the settlement that we're not standardizing or advertising commissions in a standard way.
Which stinks because obviously that would be the best idea of it all, right?
Sure.
Create a new Facebook page and have everything there, but we can't. So
And this gets coupled, and not to get into the weeds, but we've studied this so heavily over the last few years. NAR does not have a social media policy. So with that, that makes it more complicated of where social media fits in to the code of ethics as well as MLS rules. But we do know that things are further prescribed through the settlement.
again, putting this on your own Facebook page is great. Putting it on your brokerage page is great. Putting it wherever is fine. Please don't just start aggregating data because again, we get into the collusion neighborhood and DOJ does not like that.
Speaking of the DOJ, how involved is the DOJ right now in enforcement?
Right now they're looking at everything. That's all I think that we can say.
The only thing I could really hit home on is I don't believe that the DOJ, like I said earlier, they are a dog with a bone with our industry right now. I definitely see further aspects of coming after super products and products that are, built around becoming a member of the National Association of REALTORS that you have access to, but they don't understand the complexity of liability of insurance and other aspects to operate those products. If you remember the original settlement that got ripped up by the Biden administration, partly one of the flawed aspects of that settlement, though it went away, was that we would have to offer lock boxes to non-members. So potentially if somebody was FISBOing or if a member of the public wanted to have access to a lockbox, that settlement was opening up different aspects, or somebody that was licensed and not a member of the National Association of REALTORS. I only bring this up because the Department of Justice, I feel, is going to continue to look at all aspects, and we see that they are with 8.0 and different products and ancillary products. And we're seeing that there is a dive in the district down in the District of Columbia with title work. So again, I think they're very involved with just monitoring all aspects of this industry, and they're not going to be going away.
That's why it's just be careful right now. We don't want to, it's like waving the red flag in front of the bull. We really don't want to do that right now. We're on our heels as it is.
Open house, buyer comes in without their agent or is not represented.
Yep.
Do we need to have a buyer agency sign?
You do not, because you are working for the seller. So you are not working with a buyer. That does not trigger a buyer agency. Now, if you become a dual agent where you start showing them around the home, you're still working for the seller. So you don't have to worry about that. But as soon as you start representing them in an agency capacity, you do need to do that. But no, open houses are fair game. You're good.
Can we upload CBC to showing time docs?
No, because showing time is part of the MLS.
Correct. That any ancillary service that is tied, and being that there's an icon in there, you can't utilize showing time. And we were actually talking to showing time because nationally they're looking into all aspects that they don't want you using any of the feedback, any of the communication that happens through any of the facilitated multi-list services cannot show any form of commission, compensation, or concessions.
So you just think, is this touching GLVR's MLS? If it is, don't put an amount in anywhere. That's rule of thumb.
Can you explain what the fines or punishments are going to be?
Yes. No.
To me, but I can't as of right now because we are working with the board, and come September, we're going to be diving into all aspects of how the fine structure will be put in place. Like we said earlier, the DOJ and this settlement really puts the multi-list to be the police force that is looking to definitely implement and enforce all of the aspects of these rules. We're coming up with an action plan and a strategic plan of how we want to do that. There are many on the MLS committee as well as the board that obviously if you violate this, there should be high-level fines that definitely go out. And, when we looked at the 8.0 and we implemented that is a major fine violation. And I can tell you to date, we only have on a handful of people that have received those fines. And the one thing I want to leave you all with, we are not in the business here to be, I got you, we caught you. We want to educate. And I believe that we are all entrepreneurs, business individual minded, as well as adults, that we are going to comply with the new rules in place. But we know that there will be times where people do stretch the rule, and that's part of business. But again, we're going to be working that fine structure out here in the fall, and we're going to be monitoring. I'm having a lot of dialogue across the state of Pennsylvania as to what our colleagues are doing, as well as nationally. I will say in October, Mallory and I are going to be traveling to CMLS to definitely talk to all of the multi-lists across the country of what we're doing specifically with the enforcement. And we're working with Larson Skinner, who is advising a lot of multi-lists. So the only thing I could say right now is to be determined by the board. We're going to be having heavy dialogue on the whole enforcement aspect, but education first. And as the slide showed, we want to take a full 6 months, because again, you're catching your legs under you with the new forms, the new rules, the new way to operate this business, that I think it would be very haphazard to come out with a fine structure, because we really don't even know how this is all going to go into implementation. Unfortunately, this is like playing golf, where you have to be in the situations, the scenarios, to see how everything is going to play out.
I think we're going to see things that we're not even anticipating seeing, which is going to be fascinating.
Correct.
Again, if you need us to come out, we've done this before with ethics, we've done it with advertising. We will come out and talk to your brokerage. We'll have a one-on-one, whatever you guys need, because we don't want to be policing you, because it is really the worst part of our job for sure. But it does put the organization at substantial risk if there is non-compliance, which we don't want to have happen for the rest of the 3,000 members.
And I will say that, the language that we're working with CRS, that when you get the notification from Mallory, if you've gotten one that is just about pictures and things like that, we're going to enhance that language for specific violations that happen with the settlement, to really hit home that, again, just what Allison said, that this is not just not putting a picture or following a mundane rule that has been put in place by the National Association of REALTORS, or even GLVR for that matter, at multi-list. This is adhering to a national settlement that was decided by the plaintiff attorneys in conjunction with the Department of Justice watching, and all aspects of a national lawsuit settlement.
I have both sides. I do already have the dual agency sign, but should I get the buyer agency signed at that point also?
Yes, so if you are a dual agent, you must get a buyer agency contract signed. Again, you can wait 2 days till the forms go live, or you can wait till the 17th, but you would definitely do that before the 17th if you are a dual agent.
I'm hearing loud and clear in our FAQs, we're going to be adding a drop down for dual agency.
We got
hearing
that.
it loud and clear.
And open houses.
Yes.
I'm getting that feeling
You're gonna
too.
write that for me, right?
Yeah, I
Yep.
will write it for you.
If you're getting listings this week, what do you have to do?
So I would do business as usual. The forms do go live on the 1st, as I keep saying. You can certainly use the new form if you don't want to have to chase them down again by the 17th. It's not a bad idea. It's not a bad thing. Please enter compensation into the MLS until the 5th, when our fields go away.
Do we need to get a copy of BAC from buyer agents on our listings currently under contract closing after August 17th?
Yes, if anything is closing after August 17th, you need to do an addendum or a new buyer agency contract if you haven't had one in place. Yes, anything after the 17th needs a buyer agency contract, no matter where you are in the process. Sorry.
Do you think this will encourage buyers to go direct to the listing agent or get a better, lower commission rate?
So I don't think,
get a better.
Yeah, so we've been talking about this, like if people will turn to FSBOs, we've had a lot of philosophical discussions here over the past 4 months. And no, I still think people want representation. Listen, I wouldn't go into court without a lawyer. I wouldn't buy a house without a realtor. I just think it's a bad idea, and I think people understand that they don't know what they don't know.
And again, I just want to hit home that what I said in the opening, statistically right now, in this heavy sellers market, people want representation on both sides. And again, we're seeing at the lowest FSBO rates within our corridor and nationally, as the National Association of REALTORS is playing out. I think this definitely prescribes further representation of how buyers are going to navigate the waters. And remember, everything is cyclical, no matter if you're selling tulips, pencils, homes. The pendulum is going to come back where many of you remember all of the concessions that sellers were giving years ago. They were giving
Like my child.
the child car, the furniture. So again, it's going to be interesting how that side plays out as inventory comes back and that pendulum goes back and forth. But again, I don't see a mass exodus if I had to prognosticate from the industry.
And dual agency, I don't know. That's an interesting question. And we've talked about that too, if that's going to push people more towards doing dual agency or I don't know. I'm not sure. I think it's a personal preference of how you feel you want to be represented if you're a client. We'll have to see. I think there's a lot of stuff that we just don't know how this is going to shake out yet.
How about with new construction and purchase agreements that are currently under contract that are scheduled to close months ahead?
Yes, you need a buyer agency contract.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to mention to everyone that there are two different BACs, exclusive and non-exclusive?
So there are two agency contracts,
think Chris
exclusive and
just
not.
said-
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yes, they're exclusive and non-exclusive. So you can find those on the PAR website as well. They've both been augmented and changed.
Outgoing phone message.
Outgoing phone message is totally fine.
Yep.
Put your compensation on your outgoing phone message. That's great. That's a good idea.
So can you say on the MLS remarks, see my personal Facebook or website for further
Information,
info?
yes. Don't say compensate.
Yes.
Compensation is the no word. Yes, but if you put on your listing
Agent
remarks,
remarks,
agent remarks, not your
No.
listing remarks.
Marketing remarks is for the
Public.
actual property.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. You can say, please see my website for more information. I think everybody understands what that means.
Yep. But don't use the term as she said.
Right.
Are you able to share the Facebook post if you are part of the real estate team or broker that listed the property?
Yeah, so if you, so just as under the Code of Ethics, Article 12, ask for permission. If you're in the same brokerage, yes, their broker owns the listings. That's pretty much no problem. Any other person, I would be very careful of. I'd be extra careful now with compensation in there. If you're going to share a listing, I would scrub the compensation portion.
Justin, if your seller agreed to pay you 6% for their listing, what's the rule with you only paying your buyer's agent 1.5% and keeping the difference?
This is the problem with that new regulation.
Correct.
So this is NAR's thought of, you guys are going to give money back. So yeah, so if your seller agrees to pay you 6%, but you've already agreed with your buyer to only accept 2%, what do you do with the difference? That is a broker question.
Yes.
There's nothing that's been given by NAR to prescribe what happens to the extra money. Do you have to go back and redo the listing contract where the seller actually only is going to offer 2%? Do you give a credit? Do you cut a check at the end? I don't know. There's no good guidance on this. So you need to sit with your broker and figure out what happens to any overages.
Yep.
Because
And
again,
that would be a company policy as
Yeah.
to how they're going to prescribe what's in the contract and what they're going to do.
this is actually the provision that I find the most offensive. Nobody wants to give back money.
I agree.
Any changes with existing buyer agency agreements that are in place but have not closed yet?
Yes, so the buyer agency has been modified with different language. So you will want to look at that and either do an addendum or execute a new one, because there are new provisions in there that have the mandatory disclosures that are mandated by NAR in the settlement agreement that the old BAC does not have. There's also language in the BAC as it exists now that you will accept any rate of compensation, and that is now illegal. So yes, you want to redo your buyer agency agreements that are in effect.
I don't know if this answered the same question. Can you touch on how we handle this with new tenants looking at rentals? They need to agree to compensation upfront on BAC?
Yes, so check out the tenant agency agreement on PAR. There is a provision where they will also discuss compensation, just like a buyer agency agreement for sale of a property.
If at an open house, a buyer who is unrepresented asks specific questions like what is the seller's preferred settlement, questions about financing, etc., is that now a requirement for a buyer broker contract?
So you have an unrepresented buyer. So yes, you can certainly disclose what the seller is offering. That's absolutely fine. You are still representing the seller, so you don't need a buyer agency contract with that person because you are representing the seller. But you can certainly disclose those terms, and actually you should, under the Code of Ethics, disclose what the seller's terms are. If that doesn't answer your question, put it back in the chat, because I'm not sure I answered that to your satisfaction.
I think we just answered that one about the difference in.
Yeah,
Yep.
the difference between the two.
Here's an idea. When a showing is scheduled through showing time, the listing agent can text/email the buyer's agent, the CBC, if any comp is being offered for signature, not through showing time, of course.
Right, so I don't know if you heard that, but Donna said if you're going to see a property, you can certainly shoot the agent a text for the CBC,
Just not through.
not through showing time itself,
Correct.
that's all. Which is the importance of having your cell phone in the system.
Exactly.
We kind of answered that one for Sherry. Is I have a listing to do as a, what do I need to do as a listing agent and the property is under contract closing in September?
You want to look at the listing contract. There are things in the listing contract that do need to be amended, even if it's closing in September, which is so annoying because I get that you're in the home stretch. But you do need to update that listing contract by August 17th.
Compensation addendum must be provided prior to setting an offer, correct?
Yes, so you never want to send the compensation addendum with the agreement of sale. That's not legal. So yes, you ideally you want to work out compensation before submitting the agreement of sale. I will say, and this was brought up in the PAR webinar, which was interesting. The new agreement of sale has paragraph 3, which has seller concessions, which does contain a compensation line. So if you are unable to get a hold of a realtor and you can't withhold an offer while you're trying to figure out compensation. That's against the code of ethics. It's also illegal. So say you've been chasing somebody down and you can put in your compensation and what you'd like as compensation in that new paragraph 3 of the agreement of sale. And then it's going to be something that's going to be negotiated after that offer is submitted. So yes, don't submit the compensation addendum with the agreement of sale, just like you shouldn't do that now.
Got 2 more questions currently.
Okay.
So considering overages upon an offer to a listing brokerage, could overages be addressed in CBC, as in any commission overages will be paid to buyer agent by listing broker?
I believe you can, because it is negotiable and you can negotiate that out as long as it's okay with your brokerage and it's a good company policy. Yes, you're fine. But you cannot, let me put it this way. You cannot accept more than is in your buyer agency. So if, I'm not sure.
I was just gonna say, you can't accept.
You can't accept more. So if that was the question, no, you absolutely cannot accept more. So there's one of 2 things. You can go back and do an addendum to your listing contract, which now offers the buyer agent more money so they can accept that, or less money. So I'm going to start over.
Yes.
Back up.
I'm going to back up. Okay. So you cannot accept more, which is the thing that I think I have a hard time wrapping my head around. So you need to come up with a policy, probably office wide, as to if you're going to credit your buyer, if they're going to, if you're going to cut them a check, if they're going to get credit towards closing costs. You cannot, as the agent, accept more money. So no, I think the answer to that is no. You cannot ever accept more money than is in your buyer agency contract when it is originally signed with your buyer. Even if the seller is offering $1 gazillion, you can only accept what you and the buyer have agreed to. I really don't like this one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not our rule.
Yeah.
What if the seller does not want to commit to a % until they get the offer?
No. No, I get it, but no, you're not able to do that. The seller needs to come up with a number, the buyer needs to come up with a number. It cannot be a wishy-washy number. It cannot be whatever percentage is coming from the house sale. It needs to be an actually ascertainable amount or percentage.
And partly in that practice, and correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, the consistency is the biggest part of this, because of the fact that I can't sit here and say, working with Mallory is never a good transaction, so I'm only going to compensate 1%. If Allison, we brought deals together, I'm going to pay her a full 3.5%. Because if anyone, now again, Allison was very clear, you don't have to show the contract, but there has to be consistency that if anybody calls to the carpet of what the compensation is, you have to disclose what that is, and it has to be consistent among all parties that are coming into the transaction.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't play favorites. They're trying to break this collusion stereotype that we have. So obviously, if I'm going to work with Justin and offer him more money than I'm working with Mal, that's kind of collusion in and of itself. So
This seems to be a hot topic. There are a lot of things that came in from this.
I know, I get it.
So I'm just gonna read what came in from that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay,
It sounds like if seller is offering more compensation than you have on BAC, the BAC cannot be amended.
Exactly.
right.
So you can't amend your buyer agency contract with your buyer when you find out commission is higher or lower.
No, wouldn't that
than
be
what
beautiful?
you originally agreed on.
Yeah, that would be, this makes no sense. to
And
me.
then Ellen
Yeah.
says you can do a totally new BAC with the buyer then, no?
No, you cannot. Because now you're working the buyer agency contract to match the seller offer of compensation, which is not permitted. So you cannot, you need to represent your buyer straight and clear from the very beginning, agree on a compensation amount and go from there. It cannot be amended, it can't be fudged, it can't be redone. It's just what you two agree upon. And that's, I think this is gonna be the sticking point of
Yep.
where we're gonna see the most fallout and possible rule changes.
Right.
So we'll see how this shakes out because it's just illogical to me.
Can we accept less than our BAC?
You can, sure. Sure, you just can't accept more. So say your BAC has 2% but your seller is and the seller's offering 1.5, that's absolutely fine. You just can't accept more.
Why could you not adjust buyer's agency contract if there is too much compensation?
Because it's against the law. I don't really have a better answer than that, unfortunately. Yeah, if Ellen, if they are saying New Jersey saying yes, we'll check it out. But as far as I know, that is totally against the spirit of the settlement.
Mm-hmm.
So where does commission
So
overage?
that's the problem.
That
So that's
part.
where there's absolutely zero guidance given as to where this overage will go. And that's where you have to figure it out with your brokerage and probably come up with a company policy or an agent policy. Do they get credited at closing for closing costs? Do they, does the seller just offer less compensation? I mean, I think that one of the things is going to happen is that the listing contract gets amended to adjust to what the buyer agency contract says. I think that's probably the cleanest. So you don't have to worry about an overage. It's just a straight percentage of what, apples to apples. But again, it's going to take an amendment to the listing contract, which again is why this is the most inefficient situation they could force on you. But
Mhm.
it's my
Yeah.
editorial comment.
I would also say, definitely work with your broker. Your broker definitely is the gold standard of what the business practices will be. And just don't make this up as you go. There's also the PAR legal hotline, and I could say that PAR has risen to the occasion with the forms. And again, they're going to be living, breathing documents because, just the donut hole that we're talking about right here, how did the forms and everything come into that? They're going to be triaging a lot of this as we go forward. But again, the legal hotline has really been effective in terms of addressing the forms and a lot of parts of the settlement.
And Brenda, I get it. I totally understand what you're saying. Like they're offering an amount of compensation. It's not, I'm going to give a gift to the buyer. However, the way this is structured, it could wind up being a gift to the buyer if it's a credit. That's why I think the best and smartest thing to do is do an addendum to the listing contract to have it match what the buyer agency contract says. So there's not that overage. But again, that's a brokerage conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So
Any other questions?
what brought about this lawsuit? What brought about this lawsuit? Gary.
Yeah. All I'll say
Once upon a
is,
time.
there were multiple class action lawsuits where, and let me give you my editorial perspective of this. A gentleman in the Midwest sold his home. He did not like what was paying out on the buyer side, and he wondered why he was paying the buyer compensation. So basically, he hired a realtor, and I liken this to a man went in, had a steak dinner, ate all the steak, and then wanted a refund on his money after he ate the dinner. But again, it was a suit coming out of the Midwest that they felt that the uncoupling of compensation for the buyer side should be removed from what the seller compensation was.
So that sparked big law firm to start going after all of the MLSs as well as all of the brokerage houses. And it was basically, we were sitting here at GLVR, and it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when we would be called into the class action suit.
I think Westlaw and MLS got sued
Correct.
right before the settlement, and so we thought, okay, now they're creeping up in
In
Pennsylvania.
all aspects of Pennsylvania. With that stated, NAR did fight the case. They had a large law firm out of Washington, D.C. that specialized in antitrust. They did lose the case with a jury coming back saying that NAR was in violation of the antitrust. They were going to then challenge and appeal, and that was in March. That's when the March settlement came out, that I felt that obviously they felt and they were advised that they would not win the appeal. So that is where all of these rules have kind of been originated, where it's coming from. These are not local rules. This is not, our board, our leadership saying, why don't we change the structure of commission? This is coming out of a national lawsuit that was over multiple months. So that's kind of where we are right now to definitely change the trajectory of kind of the industry. And, you talk about an overhaul of probably one of the largest aspects of the American economy right now in terms of these rule changes and where everything fits in.
So again, hopefully we will be out of this in 7 years. This is the beauty of being an association
Correct.
owned real MLS, that we only have to do this for 7 years. So we'll see what happens. Can you check the chat for me?
Yep.
I saw stuff popping up.
So we can change listing contracts, but we can't change buyer agents contracts to match compensation.
Yes.
I want to say.
Yes, you cannot change the list. You cannot change the buyer agency contract, but you can change the listing contract.
I'm going to tell them to see 69 and 70 at the NAR FAQ.
Yep.
Yeah, Mal's putting in a chat where you can go see that on the realtor.fax. Yeah, so
I got a question coming in. That's what
yeah.
I'm just waiting for here.
She's typing, I'm reading. So,
Yep.
Okay, so yes, so I get it. I understand that the back, we have a question regarding sellers concessions and sold and settled. If we don't specify an option for compensation, it's hard for appraisers to make adjustments. We get that. We've talked about it extensively. That's why we're talking about what to do with that drop down box, that we do want some information there for you to be able to do your jobs. We don't want to put so much information in that we're going to get ourselves smacked. So I think just stay tuned and we will figure that out as we go.
Yes.
But we hear it, we get it.
If the BAC doesn't get provided, how would a listing agent know to change the listing contracts?
That's just going to be a communication. I can tell Justin, hey, my buyer and I agreed to 2%. Can you amend your listing contract? And hopefully there's not a tussle over terms.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just going to boil down to a lot more communication than I think has been happening in the past.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be the challenge for sure, especially in this market where things go so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, for Tom, there is a talking about the adjustments for appraisers and whatnot. There's an article in Connect today that includes a whole conversation and information about this effect on appraisers. Check it out.
Correct.
Okay. So can you hear Mallory? She said there's an article in Connect today about appraisers and getting the information that you need. So check out the Connect that went out this morning.
I'll put that in the link too.
And Mal's going to put it in the link as well. So can a seller say they are willing to offer a commission but not give a specific amount and leave it blank? Karen, I know, and I think Andrew just asked that question too. So the question is, can the seller offer compensation and not put a specific amount? I need to look at that and I'm going to write it down. I need to pull the form and get you an answer. And then I will add it to the FAQs that are on the website. I want to make sure I give you the actual correct answer. I know the buyer agency contract has to be a specific number. I'm not sure about the listing contract, but I will find that out for you.
And I will say that to the brokers and all of the agents on the call here today, that this is not a final destination. This is an ongoing dialogue, that as you are implementing your new practices and policies and you come across something, let us know. We will work to get you answers, as well as we will build it into the FAQ and build it into a larger part of our communication and education that we're putting out as well.
Because if you have the question, probably 3,000 of your realtors, fellow realtors have the same question. Why not put all your buyer agency at 3% and then you can take less but not more? You could do that. There's nothing saying, that's a good business policy, and that's something that maybe your brokerage decides to do.
Correct.
Yeah, and if you don't want to be amending forms all day, you could definitely do that.
But again, I would defer to definitely having dialogue with your broker and knowing what the business policies are with the implementation here in your brokerage.
So the lawsuit forces prices up instead of the misrepresentation that DOJ is. Yeah, so Ellen brought up the lawsuit is actually forcing prices up. It's just, we're not fans. Let's just put it that way.
Let's call this what this is. This was an assault on the way that you get compensated. And again,
And to the detriment of the client.
correct. So
We get it.
we get it.
We're thrilled.
Anything else? That's all I got for right now.
That's all we have right now. So is there anything else?
Anything
for the good of the
else?
order? Do you want to unmute?
And what I would say is, again, I want to thank all of you for taking time, putting
Oh, thank goodness.
Chris.
time into the industry. I want to say that we have a lot of great agents. We have a lot of great brokers. And I can't hit home enough with Lori Campbell's leadership of just getting everything over the hump here in this year. And I know we're going to be in good hands with Michael as president-elect as we evolve with all of this into 2025. Please feel free to reach out. And my team here, the entire team, I want to thank them because we've done nothing but eat, sleep, and dive into this settlement. And again, I challenge all of you to check out the website, the FAQs. We're going to be updating. This broadcast will be there. And we'll continue to do this over the next few months as we work to implement, and we will definitely have a full encompassed webinar before the enforcement gets rolled out as we have dialogue with the board.
Try to get this up again.
Keep checking. Mallory said she'll try to get this recording out by the end of the week in case you want to watch it again. And
Or miss the beginning.
or if you missed the beginning, try to get onto one of those PAR forums, either the 7th or the 23rd, that go over the forms. Take a class or two here. I think they're going to be really good and helpful. And then you know where to find our information on the GLVR website. You are always free to call or email if you have a question. We'd rather you do that than do something that's going to get you into a world of trouble, which we don't want.
And lastly, I'll say, we're all ears as well, not only adding to the website, but the classes. Anything that we could put at your fingertips,
Definitely.
please let us know. Chris Rader does a great job with the forms. We're going to have Melanie McLean with the negotiation expert. And again, if there are more courses or more PAR form change courses that we need to offer or more buyer agency education, let us know. I want you also to know that this is going to be changing in the new member orientation that we're putting out. That again, the buyer forms and the seller forms that we have is going to definitely now encompass all of this as well as everything that we're doing. So we're all ears of what we can put at your fingertips and how we serve all of you. And we never forget the fact that we are here for you.
So now go absorb all of this.
Yes.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much for your time, and good luck with everything. And we are here to help you.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.